The first thing I did after becoming a zombie was tie up a beauty to bear me children, simply because this is a world of a zombie outbreak. Having crossed over into this world, I turned directly into a zombie, but fortunately, I acquired a children bring blessings system. As long as humans bear children for me, I can obtain various rewards. At this moment, a girl was screaming in fright, sitting on the ground and waving her hands continuously to beg for mercy, saying in her mouth, "Don't eat me, don't eat me." But I walked straight up to her, reached out, and pinned her down. Seeing this scene, the girl instantly closed her eyes, believing she was dead for sure. However, the anticipated biting did not happen to her. Instead, a moist tissue gently wiped across her face, removing the stains on her skin. The girl abruptly opened her eyes again, wide open as well, unable to understand why the zombie didn't eat her but instead helped wipe her face. I did not explain this either. Very soon I wiped her face clean, revealing a small, delicate face. It lacked the pointed snake spirit shape popular among internet influencers. Overall, it was somewhat round, like a small goose egg. Yet paired with those exquisite facial features, it looked more harmonious and pleasing to the eye than a snake spirit face, using anime terminology to describe it. After taking a clear look at her face, I tossed the wet tissue aside, then grabbed her clothes and slowly pulled them down, causing something to suddenly pop out, startling me for a split second. No, I didn't hear it wrong, it really did pop out. As for my strange actions, the girl was even more dumbfounded. Her already not-so-bright brain was completely inadequate at the moment, leaving her blankly letting me toy with her. It wasn't until I stopped my movements that she finally came to her senses, and then timidly spoke again. "Don't eat me. My meat really isn't tasty. If you're hungry, you can eat salt-baked chicken drumsticks. They're super delicious." Following that, pack after pack of vacuum-sealed salt-baked chicken drumsticks were tremblingly handed out right in front of me. I reached out and took them, but instead of eating them, I threw them directly aside. Seeing this, the girl shivered all over. Her already trembling composure completely broke down, and she burst into tears. "Wah, wah, wah! Not eating you is fine, but you have to promise me one thing. As long as you promise, not only will I not eat you, but I'll also give you food so you won't go hungry anymore." At this moment, I was holding a notebook in my hand, with these few lines written in ballpoint pen. Without hesitation, the girl nodded repeatedly. "Okay, as long as you don't eat me, I'll do whatever you want." Although she didn't understand why a zombie could write, that didn't stop her from agreeing. As long as she wasn't eaten piece by piece, she was indeed willing to do anything. Earlier, she had seen people being devoured by zombies. It was simply too terrifying. I placed it back in front of her. It's very simple. "Help me bear a child." This line of writing was very short and indeed extremely simple, but seen through the girl's eyes, it turned her into a wooden goose. Her small mouth hung open in a daze as she looked at the notebook text, which hadn't even dried yet, completely at a loss for words. A zombie actually asking her to help bear a child. If she hadn't experienced this personally, she would have died before believing it. Even now that she was experiencing it, she still couldn't believe it. There was no helping it. This was simply too absurd. Although she was a bit slow-witted, the apocalypse had been descending for nearly a month, and she knew enough about zombies to survive. Otherwise, she wouldn't have ventured out driven by extreme hunger. After quite a while, she barely managed to digest this information. "Help? Help you bear a child? I didn't read the words on it wrong, did I?" I nodded to confirm there was no mistake. My vocal cords were damaged, so I can't speak normally and can only communicate through writing. However, simple body language can still express things clearly. "Scan! Can I refuse?" The girl swallowed hard. Having lived this long without even holding a boy's hand, asking her to bear a child was truly putting her on the spot. Hearing this, I took back the notebook and started writing again. "You can, but I'm hungry right now, and you look quite appetizing." Seeing this, she hurriedly stretched her neck to peek. Don't write that!" My handwriting was very fast. When the girl saw the text at the beginning, she even felt a glimmer of hope, but upon seeing the words that followed, she immediately pressed down on the pen and burst into tears. "You don't need to cry either. I truly won't let you help in vain. Aside from the food I mentioned earlier, I will also protect your personal safety. You know how dangerous the outside world is? Do you think you can survive on your own? Think positively. You've just found a partner who is a bit different, that's all." For a moment, the girl was somewhat dazed. Accepting it was certainly difficult, but with this reasoning, her perspective gradually began to shift. Her parents had all lost contact, and she had barely scraped by for a month, relying on the stored food at home. Deep down, she had long wished to have someone to rely on. Bearing a child was indeed hard for her to accept, but compared to being swallowed alive in one breath, it wasn't quite as unacceptable. Thinking and thinking, the girl muddle-headedly nodded in agreement. You have to be gentle. I'm a virgin." After speaking, the girl bit her lower lip and closed her eyes. I didn't act like a righteous gentleman either. I directly pulled down the rolling shutter door at the entrance, placed the futons from the shelves onto the floor, and then carried the mentally prepared girl over. Naturally, the following events took place, but skipping the details. Fortunately, when the system activated, it restored my normal male functionality, so I didn't have to worry about impotence. Instead, it made me even more fierce. The reproductive isolation with normal humans and viral infections were likewise repaired by the system. It wasn't until an hour later that the system prompt sounded, "Congratulations to the host for successfully taking a wife. Reward: bloodline purification. Can purify one's own bloodline and comprehensively enhance physical attributes." Once the two of them reached a marital union, the wife-taking reward was directly issued. Seeing the system reward, my gaze instantly brightened. I was currently a common zombie bloodline, arguably the lowest tier. Forget going toe-to-toe with heavy firearms. I wasn't even certain I could defeat a bold, ordinary human. It was only against timid girls like this that I could easily handle them. Such a trashy bloodline definitely needed enhancement. Even if I couldn't be as terrifying as a tyrant zombie from the movies, at least I shouldn't be worse than a licker. Otherwise, it would truly be hard to guarantee safety. After all, I wasn't alone anymore. I now had a girl helping me bear children, and lacking strength simply wouldn't cut it. Afterwards, I looked down at the girl beneath me, gently covered her with clothing, and then stood up to walk aside and claim the reward. This was a tube of red liquid contained in a transparent glass test tube. The liquid flowing inside looked like molten lava. I glanced at it briefly before tilting my head back and drinking it down. Instantly, the energy inside my body exploded with a rumble, instantly ravaging my physique before rapidly repairing it. Externally, nothing much changed, but internally, earth-shattering transformations took place. The system said it only purified the bloodline, but in reality, it remodeled my entire body. Once the overwhelming medicinal potency subsided, the zombie characteristics on my body were almost invisible. The only thing remaining different was the crimson, tyrannical eyes of a zombie. Otherwise, if I claimed to be human, no one would suspect otherwise. I nodded in satisfaction at this. Naturally, I didn't like zombie traits, but having only my eyes differ was truly a great thing for me. Next, I reached out and clawed at the floor tiles. The result was that my hand pierced in effortlessly. The hard floor felt like wet mud, and I casually scooped out a chunk. Then, with a gentle squeeze, the chunk of flooring I had scooped out was crushed into fine sand grains. And after finishing all this, my palm suffered no damage whatsoever. After trying it out, I was instantly thrilled. The system certainly didn't let me down. Although I didn't know how the outside world had changed, relying on the strength I now possessed, I believed self-preservation would be no problem. And this was just the reward for taking a wife. Once the girl helped me bear a child and I reaped the children bring blessings reward, that would be the true main course. Once I had sufficient strength, I could go to more places and care for more girls, or even enter doomsday bases where large numbers of survivors gathered. At that time, I could step by step. The more I thought about it, the more heated my heart became, and my gaze turned toward the girl not far away. The great enterprise of procreation must not be delayed under any circumstances. Meanwhile, Rinamana was completely dumbfounded. She never expected that she would just surrender her first time like this, and moreover, to a zombie. After snapping out of the state of shock, she was frightened by herself. How on earth did she agree? Was it fear of being eaten, or the temptation of free room and board? A partner who wasn't normal was truly too unique. What was she going to do from now on? Should she find a way to escape, or really stay and help bear children according to the trade? But if she tried to escape, where would she run? The moment she stepped out of her hiding apartment for the first time, she ran into this kind of situation, showing that the current world was even more terrifying than imagined. Chances were that if she escaped from here, something even worse was waiting for her. But if she didn't escape, she had no choice but to obediently obey. As Rinamano thought about it, she felt miserable and started crying all over again. But before she could cry for long, she sensed my gaze landing on her. At this moment, I had returned to her side once more, looking at her with my aggressive crimson and blue pupils. Rinamano hugged her chest timidly. "Well, what are you going to do?" Hearing this, I simply handed the notebook over. It only had 3 large characters written on it, "Bear children." Seeing the words on the notebook, Rinamano wanted to say something, but the moment she opened her mouth, she was silenced by me. This time it lasted even longer, until nightfall arrived before the shop quieted down again. Rinamano felt like she was about to fall apart. She hadn't expected bearing children to be so exhausting, and by now, she was experiencing some regrets. Just as her thoughts were in turmoil, I handed a Pocky stick out in front of her. "For me?" Rinamano asked in disbelief. Hearing this, I nodded. This instantly astonished Rinamano. After everything she had been through, she had long since slapped an evil label on me, assuming I only knew how to bully her. But now, I didn't seem as bad as she imagined. Ignoring the zombie identity, things weren't actually as terrible as she thought. Aside from constantly making her help bear children, everything else was fine. After opening the packaging and taking a bite, the sweet taste immediately brought a look of bliss to Rinamano's face. Getting happy just from having something to eat, she really is silly and cute, I thought, standing to the side and watching. Originally, I had only found a partner for the system rewards, harboring no particular feelings one way or the other, but seeing the other person's silly and cute appearance, I couldn't help but feel a subtle shift. After all, who could resist a silly girlfriend? Then I casually opened a bottle of water and continued feeding her. Rinamano also gradually warmed up to it, taking the water and drinking a few sips directly. Her fluid loss during the previous bouts of exercise hadn't been small, and she truly needed replenishment. Just like that, she ate while I fed her, and the atmosphere could be said to be very harmonious. This girl Rinamano looked slender, but her appetite wasn't small. She devoured chocolate and bread in 2 or 3 bites. No wonder she could pop out. Everything had its reasons. Being able to eat is great. Later on, I won't have to worry about milk for the baby, and even I can get a share. After spending about half an hour, this feeding session finally concluded. Well fed and watered, Rinamano gradually relaxed and stopped letting her mind run wild. At this, I smiled slightly. Wanting someone to help bear children naturally couldn't be achieved through intimidation or force. The other person had to genuinely not be repulsed by all this, for things to progress naturally. Besides, I wasn't a real zombie. I had a heart and emotions, and didn't want to use forceful methods. At this moment, the night outside grew deeper. Doomsday nights were an absolute restricted zone because zombies became much more active, making Rinamano somewhat fearful, especially with the zombie roars echoing from outside from time to time, causing her to involuntarily lean closer to me, completely ignoring the fact that I was also part of the zombie clan. I didn't intentionally remind her either. Instead, I leaned closer to her side and finally lay down, sleeping side by side like a real couple. Perhaps she was truly exhausted, but Rinamano, having found something to lean on, fell asleep before long, with one hand resting on my chest and her little head rubbing against my side. Looking at the girl draped over me, I fell asleep without realizing it. Logically speaking, zombies didn't need sleep, but clearly, I was no ordinary zombie. Early the next morning, I was woken up by the system prompt. Wife Rinamano's favorability toward you has increased. Reward: favorability boosts small gift pack. Please keep up the good work, host, and make your wife devoted to you as soon as possible so she can peacefully raise offspring. There are rewards for increasing favorability too. I couldn't help feeling surprised. This system was practically handing out welfare. Also, why did this girl Rinamano increase her favorability early in the morning? Puzzled, I opened my eyes. Entering my field of vision was a small face. It was precisely Rinamano, whose favorability had inexplicably increased. At that moment, she was staring intently at my face. Seeing me open my eyes, she hurriedly lay back down, closed her eyes, and began pretending to sleep. Whether out of a guilty conscience or something else, her face was even slightly flushed. I touched the face she had been staring at. It lacked the rotting appearance of a zombie and was no different from a normal human's, just like every other part of my body, only slightly pale. However, this unhealthy skin tone was actually more sought after nowadays. Didn't those idol trainees have faces painted whiter than one another? My unhealthy pale complexion instead enhanced my personal charm, especially carrying lethal appeal for young girls. So it's about looks. I realized why my favorability had increased at this moment. She discovered that not only was I unlike ordinary underworld zombies, but I was also extremely good looking, matching her aesthetic standards. Coupled with what had transpired between the two of them, her favorability naturally and effortlessly rose. A proper face value win. But this was also a good thing. It not only brought our relationship closer, but also yielded system rewards. I turned my attention to the small gift pack, feeling a tiny bit of anticipation as to what it would unlock. Without dawdling, I looked at the pretending to sleep Rinamano and directly chose to open the pack. Soon, on the translucent screen visible only to me, a small red gift pack was slowly opened. Optic eye function. Can focus light to give the wearer better vision while granting night vision. Property 1, indestructible. Property 2, can be set to invisible. I didn't expect such a simple little gift pack to drop top-tier equipment, the exact kind that suited me well. Glancing at Rinamano, who was still feigning sleep, I couldn't help grinning and reaching out to stroke her little head. This girl really was my cash cow, repeatedly letting me farm system rewards. Rubbed by me, Rinamano couldn't help shrinking her head back, worrying in her heart whether this zombie who loved bearing children was going to bully her again. However, the anticipated bullying didn't happen. After rubbing her a few times, I left the convenience store. Hearing the sound of the rolling shutter door, Rinamano opened her feigning eyes, wanting to see why I was opening and closing the door. But the sight that met her eyes when she opened them left her completely flustered, because I was already gone. Rinamano abruptly scrambled up. Logically speaking, my disappearance should have been a good thing, but she couldn't feel happy at all. In fact, she felt extremely uncomfortable inside, and her eyes couldn't help turning red, biting her lower lip like this as time slowly passed. Having never interacted with men before, she didn't know why she felt this way, but it just felt awful. Fortunately, it didn't take long before the closed, rolling shutter door opened again. With an almost instinctive reaction, Rinamano rushed straight toward me. Just before reaching my side, she remembered something and halted her hurried footsteps. Where did you go?" Though her steps stopped, she couldn't help asking, still carrying a timid tone, though a few different elements had crept into it. Seeing this, I smiled slightly, closed the rolling shutter door, and handed over the items in my hand. It was a paper shopping bag containing several pieces of clothing. Rinamano's gaze was instantly drawn to it. "For me?" she asked uncertainly. After I nodded, Rinamano hurriedly reached out and took the bag. At that moment, she finally understood what I had gone out to do just now, not to abandon her, but to find her clothes. Having experienced 2 intense battles, her clothes were already tattered, and her pants weren't much better off either. It's unavoidable. After becoming a zombie, there are some lingering effects, and I tend to be a bit more violent when it comes to handling matters. Rinamno, who had never been in a relationship before, was instantly warmed by my gesture, though the system didn't pop up a favorability reward. It was clear that while favorability had increased, it hadn't reached the required threshold for the small gift pack to be claimed. I didn't feel regret. As long as I kept maintaining this progress, the system rewards would definitely be mine. After giving the girl several 100 million spores of life, I found her some new clothes, since her original ones had been torn to shreds by me. "Thank you," Rinamano said, holding the clothes. Compared to before, she was a bit more shy this time. First, put these on, I wrote again in the notebook. Although the bloodline purification had improved my physical attributes in every way, my throat still hadn't fully recovered. Aside from the growls of a saint, I still couldn't speak, though it had recovered slightly compared to before. If I can just get another vial of bloodline purification fluid, I believe recovering the ability to speak won't be difficult at all. Rin Imano, who had grown accustomed to this mode of communication, nodded and went behind the shelves to change into the clothes. She really is simple-minded. In just 2 days, she has gotten used to being with me, almost ignoring the fact that I am a zombie. After all, apart from my zombie traits, everything else about me is normal human. In this dog-eat-dog apocalypse, other normal humans might not even be as good as a zombie like me. Rin Amano, this kind of silly, cute girl, is lucky she met me. Otherwise, she'd have been eaten down to the bones long ago. I suppose this is what they call the foolish have their own luck. I couldn't help but chuckle inwardly, then lifted my hand to tidy up the other thing I had brought back. It was a Japanese brand smartphone, picked up on the way back from the clothing store. Its original owner was the shop's proprietress, who had turned into a zombie. I had already used her fingerprint to unlock it, changed the password, and after accessing the device, I began checking the latest news. Rin Amano was fast at dressing, but even though she was fully clothed, she didn't dare to come out. It wasn't that the clothes were ugly, but that the set I had chosen for her made her feel incredibly shy. The slim-fit white button-up shirt was normal enough, but the bottom was a short white pleated skirt, followed by white long stockings. Any way you look at it, this outfit just seems designed to make people commit crimes. Images from yesterday couldn't help but flash through Rin Amano's mind, and her face instantly flushed with a deep red. I, operating the phone, didn't think much of it. Outfits like this were everywhere on the streets before the apocalypse. Seeing that there was no movement for a long time, I put the phone down and tapped on the shelf. Hearing the sound of the tapping, Rin Amano knew I was looking for her. Although she couldn't suppress her shyness, she still walked out from behind the shelf. When Rin Amano emerged, my eyes suddenly lit up, not because the outfit was particularly fancy, but because Rin Amano was so well endowed. Those super-spec assets were enough to lock one's gaze, and I couldn't help but imagine the buttons flying off. Her legs under the pleated skirt weren't the scrawny kind. They were fair, rounded, long, and straight. Paired with the semi-transparent long white stockings, it's no wonder Rin Amano thought I had ulterior motives when she put them on. And I did, in fact, have motives. Faced with my scorching gaze, Rin Amano's face turned even redder. She wanted to say something to alleviate the heat that threatened to melt her, but the moment she opened her mouth, I swept her up into my arms. It wasn't until an hour later that things finally calmed down. I couldn't help but feel a bit emotional. She couldn't even handle 1 hour. Rin Amano, however, covered her face, wanting to cry. I really do have bad intentions, she thought, and she was right. But through these repeated intimate exchanges, our relationship had grown much closer. Without needing me to feed her, Rin Amano went off to find food on her own to replenish her energy. The convenience store was filled with all sorts of snacks and drinks, which was paradise for someone who loved snacking. She quickly sank into an ocean of delicious treats. I stood quietly to the side. I could eat these snacks too, but with a zombie's palate, eating them was no different from chewing on candle wax. It didn't taste delicious at all, and was actually very hard to swallow. Fresh meat, however, held a huge attraction for me. Every time I saw Rin Amano, a living human, I had the urge to go up and take a bite. It was only suppressed by my human will. Thinking of meat, I touched my stomach and felt a bit hungry. Zombies won't die if they don't eat, but they still feel hunger. This is why zombies chase living creatures so frantically whenever they encounter them, especially for a zombie like me who is manufacturing babies every day. The consumption is not small. Each time it's several 100 million. Energy is conserved, so if I consume it, I naturally have to replenish it. However, since there was no meat in the store, I had to go out and find some. It didn't have to be a living human. Other living creatures would do, like uninfected chickens, ducks, or perhaps cows and sheep, or even various types of fish in the water were all within the realm of edible. Furthermore, fish in the city were easier to deal with. There were plenty of fish in the various man-made ponds, and they could be caught quite easily. As it happened, when I went out to get the clothes earlier, I had seen a fairly large man-made pond. As long as I found a fishing rod and bait, I could get myself something to eat. Action follows thought. At this time of day, it was the perfect moment for fish to bite. I'm going out for a bit. Stay in the store and don't go out. Here, take this to play with if you're bored. I immediately took the notebook to explain the situation to Rinamano and handed her the phone. I had brought the phone back, hoping to use it to go online to learn about the state of the apocalypse. But unfortunately, the network had already been cut. Still, playing offline games on the phone or watching a good movie was no problem. You're going out? Rin Amano took the phone, but instead of playing with it, she looked at me and asked. She didn't want to experience that feeling from when I left before. In her heart, she didn't want me to go out, but she couldn't force me to stay, so she could only watch me with a pleading expression. Don't worry, I'll be back soon. I wrote quickly, then patted her little head. Then be careful, she said, enjoying my gentle touch. She didn't say anything else, but gave a slightly awkward, concerned instruction. I will. After replying in the notebook, I opened the shutter door and walked out. This was a commercial street with a wide variety of shops. I immediately headed toward a fishing tackle store. Around me, many zombies were wandering, and the road was cluttered with abandoned vehicles. Traces of blood and skeletal remains were visible everywhere. A glance was enough to see the decay of the apocalypse. For Rinamano to have dared to come out to this environment to scavenge, she really has some guts. The sound of me opening and closing the door attracted several zombies, but after sniffing that I was one of their own, they went back to their aimless wandering. Afterward, I successfully arrived at the tackle store. The owner here had also turned into a zombie, so I proceeded with a $0 purchase right in front of him. Having arrived at the man-made pond, I found a shaded spot, sat down, and began preparing the ground bait. Next was the fishing. I cast the hook with bait, a perfect arc through the air. Having used so much bait, it was bound to be a big catch. Expecting anything less would be foolish, as the fish in the man-made pond were quite stupid. And yet, from morning until afternoon, the bobber remained as steady as ever. There wasn't even a single bite. What the hell? I completely snapped. I stood up, snapped the fishing rod in half, and tossed it into the pond. Draining! I have to drain this pond. Such ungrateful creatures. I can't let them get away with this. Just as I was leaving in a fit of rage, inside a building not far from the pond, a figure with a slightly open mouth seemed to wake up from a dream and withdrew their gaze from the window. Big brother, I just saw a zombie fishing! And it was shouting and yelling because it couldn't catch any fish. This was a young girl wearing a high school uniform, with a pair of large, blinking eyes. What kind of nonsense are you spouting? How could a zombie fish? The girl's brother, hearing this, shook his head helplessly, obviously not believing his sister's account. He had been out many times to search for food and had even killed zombies with his own hands. He felt he understood the nature of zombies better than anyone. These mindless monsters only had the instinct to hunt for food. Communication or anything of the sort was completely impossible. Even if there were some that were different, it would at most be a difference in strength. Forget fishing, they couldn't even open a bottle of water. It's true, I'm not talking nonsense. If you don't believe me, you can come and see. Seeing her brother didn't believe her, the girl became anxious. Come and look. Saying that, the girl grabbed her brother's hand and pulled him to the window. In the distance, they were on the 10th floor and could see the entire man-made pond. There were indeed plenty of zombies wandering by the shore, but there was no sign of a fishing zombie. That's strange. He was just there. And where's his broken fishing rod? All right, if you're bored, just play some games on the phone. Running around jumping will make you hungry faster. Food isn't easy to get these days. We have to save where we can. The girl pouted and wanted to say something, but thinking about how hard it was for her brother to find food, she obediently listened and picked up the phone to play. Meanwhile, I was holding the broken fishing rod, my face filled with apology. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have blamed you. Not catching any fish wasn't your fault. Originally, I had stormed off in anger, but thinking that not catching fish was because the rod was a piece of junk, I fished it back out and expressed my apology. If you don't speak, I'll take that as you not holding a grudge. You're a very magnanimous child. I chuckled, the apology on my face dissipating, and tossed the rod into the trash can. However, the fish in the pond were definitely being difficult. A water pump was hard to come by, but getting some fishing nets should be easy. I quickly returned to the street, intending to go to the fishing tackle shop to get a net. However, when I passed by the convenience store, my expression changed abruptly. because the lock on the shutter door had been pried open by force. Scream all you want! No one is coming to save you, even if you scream your lungs out. Attracting zombies will only make your death more miserable. Inside the store, besides Rinamano, there were 3 young men. With lewd smiles, they had cornered Rinamano against the shelves. You, guys, don't come any closer. My husband will be back in a moment, and he won't let you off. Rinamano held a fruit knife, trying to make herself look as fierce as possible toward the 3. But her silly, cute appearance not only failed to intimidate them, it made them even more excited. As for the threat, the 3 of them didn't take it seriously at all. In the apocalypse, those roaming the streets are either like Rinamano, who only came out from hiding because they were desperate for food, or they are truly dangerous people. Clearly, these 3 were the latter. 2 of them held large machetes, still stained with blood. The man in the middle held a hunting rifle. You say your husband won't let us off? Believe it or not, when he returns, we'll ravage you right in front of him, and he won't even dare to let out a fart. The man with the rifle sneered, a twisted light flashing in his eyes. Faced with this situation, Rinamano's face turned pale instantly, and her forced ferocity could no longer be sustained. However, just as she was in complete despair, ready to kill herself with the fruit knife, the closed shutter door opened again. The light made the view somewhat hazy, but the desperate Rinamano recognized at a glance that it was me, her baby-making zombie. "Husband!" Rinamano called out instinctively. Then, pushing past the 3 men surrounding her, she rushed to my side with the fastest speed of her life. "Darling, you're finally back," Rinamano said, her face full of excitement. I nodded slightly, reached out to pat her head to comfort her, and then looked toward the 3 intruders. "So this is your husband? He sure chose a great time to come back, just like a hero returning. But this works out perfectly. I love showing off in front of heroes. Quickly, run! They have a gun! It can shoot through walls!" Rinamano regained her senses and reminded me, then grabbed my hand, turning to try and flee. But I had no intention of running. Rinamano was desperate. They were at the door, and there was still a chance to escape. The opponents had machetes and a gun. Staying meant certain death. Yet I remained unmoved. The man on the other side spoke up. "Your husband is pretty smart, knowing he can't escape. After all, no matter how fast you run, you can't be faster than a bullet, right? Hey kid, bring your woman over to us and obey our instructions. If you make us happy, maybe we'll even let you live." Hearing this, Rinamano's face turned white again. Her eyes were fixed on me, and she couldn't help but feel worried that I would truly hand her over to them. However, I remained standing in place, looking at the 3 of them indifferently, muttering to myself as if watching a clown performance. The 3 of them had been quite smug, but as time passed, they began to feel that something was wrong. "You don't know what's good for you, then go to hell!" The man with the rifle, the most hot-tempered, raised his weapon and prepared to fire. The barrel had been fitted with a silencer, so the sound wouldn't be too loud. But just as he was about to pull the trigger, his body suddenly jolted. His haughty expression froze, and his finger couldn't pull the trigger a millimeter further. He looked down with great difficulty, only to see an arm protruding from his chest. Before he even realized it, I had already reached him. My uncanny speed was so fast he couldn't even see it. Accompanied by a muffled thud, I pulled my arm back, my hand clutching his slightly beating heart. "No!" The man with the rifle let out a cry of terror before slowly collapsing to the ground. The remaining 2 watched the scene, unable to stop themselves from swallowing hard. When I turned my gaze toward them, they fell to the ground on their butts. "Spare! Spare us!" The 2 pleaded with pale faces. The person in front of them was definitely not human. That terrifying speed and the ability to grab a heart with bare hands were things no normal person could do. I didn't respond, instead pulling out a pack of wet wipes to wipe the blood off my hands. The action seemed harmonious, but to the begging pair it sounded the death knell. Those who survive in the apocalypse all have a certain toughness to them. Seeing that I had no intention of letting them go, one of them lashed out in desperation, scrambling up from the ground to swing his machete at me. However, I simply raised my hand and caught the blade. The man, trying to counterattack, opened his mouth to say something, but he only felt his hand go numb, and the machete was gone. Then a cold glint flashed past his neck. The last one quietly came up behind me, aiming his sharpened machete at my lower back for a heavy strike. But the sharp tip only broke the skin before getting stuck in my iron-like muscles. How is this possible? The last man was completely dumbfounded. When I slowly turned my head to look at him, he completely broke down, dropped his machete, and bolted for the door. I simply hurled the machete in my hand. As he ran, it pierced directly through his waist. Then, with the residual force, it pinned him to the register counter, and he let out a miserable shriek. This massive commotion attracted the wandering zombies outside. I had originally intended to properly deal with the guy who stabbed my waist, but seeing this, I frowned slightly. I'm not afraid of zombies, but Rinamano can't handle them. If I attract them all here, I'll have to go through the trouble of cleaning them up. So I stopped the torture, grabbed the man by the nape of his neck like a chick, and took the initiative to meet the zombies being drawn toward the sound. Once the zombies gathered, I ran away from the store. The zombies, firmly attracted by the scent of blood, followed me away. Rin Amano was waiting anxiously. When she saw my figure return, she could no longer suppress the pounding in her heart. She threw herself into my arms, wrapping her hands tightly around my waist, terrified that if she let go, she would never see me again. The system chimed at this moment. Wife Rinamano's favorability toward you has increased, reaching the fresh stage. Reward, Favorability Boost Gift Pack. Please keep up the good work, host, and make your wife devoted to you as soon as possible so she can peacefully raise offspring. I didn't dilly-dally and directly claimed the system gift pack. The small bag slowly opened, finally revealing an item, X-ray potion. After consumption, the user will gain X-ray vision, capable of seeing through illusions. After seeing this reward item, I couldn't help but curse in surprise. I believed that any man would want X-ray vision. Whenever it was late at night, imagining oneself having this ability could make one happy for hours on end, let alone using it to make money. Just walking down the street and looking at the various sights passing by would be thrilling enough. I had imagined it too, but it was just a fantasy. Such an ability is completely unrealistic, yet now the opportunity was right here. Looking at Rinamano, who was hugging herself tightly, she truly was my treasure girl. Every single reward had never disappointed me. After feeling a wave of emotion in my heart, I immediately drank the potion. I didn't want to wait even a second for this dreamed-of ability. The potion came in a small jade vial, just like a magical potion. It tasted thick and viscous, but once it slid down my throat, it went down smoothly. Then a warm sensation wandered across my pupils, and shortly after, I felt my field of vision change. Whenever I concentrated and wanted to see through something, the original barrier would slowly fade and finally become completely transparent. My very first reaction was to look at Rinamano in my arms. Her clothes gradually became transparent, followed by the scene every man dreams of. Such peeping was filled with unprecedented stimulation, a thrill that made me unable to hold back for a moment, and my blood began to boil. At this time, Rinamano was holding onto me tightly, enjoying the embrace that gave her a sense of security, but suddenly, under my repeated tutoring, she was no longer a clueless little girl. She reacted immediately, and her little face turned crimson red. You're injured," she said with a red face, pulling back a little, her speech somewhat stuttering. I didn't reply to this. Instead, I scooped her up and placed her on the checkout counter. Injured? Forget about mere minor scrapes. Even if I were hacked a few times in this kind of atmosphere, I wouldn't even bat an eye. Rinamano let out a gasp of surprise, and naturally, what followed didn't need to be spoken of, and this time we didn't even need to drag it out. It wasn't until an hour later that everything finally subsided. Rinamano's hair was damp with sweat, and she was panting heavily. However, compared to before, there was a bit more tenderness in her eyes, and a look of bliss lingered on her face. After my tender kisses, she was now willing in her heart to bear children for me. Although bearing children for a zombie was absurd, her heart simply welcomed it. Seeing this, I gently stroked away the damp strands of hair from her forehead before cleaning up the mess in the shop. The bodies of the two reckless intruders were tossed directly outside into the street for the wandering zombies to clean up. Afterward, I grabbed a mop to clean up the bloodstains while simultaneously sterilizing the area. "I'll help," Rinamano said, catching her breath and taking the mop to pitch in. I didn't turn her down. While Rinamano mopped the floor, I opened a bottle of floral toilet water and sprayed it around to cover up the fishy stench of blood. Through our concerted cooperation, the shop quickly returned to its original state. However, I didn't stop there. Taking a look at the smashed lock, I headed out once again. This time, Rinama wasn't worried. She waited quietly inside the store because she knew I would never abandon her. Not long after, I drove back in a three-wheeled pickup truck, carrying several large steel frames in the back. The sound of the engine also attracted a group of zombies trailing behind. But this group of zombies was orderly and didn't huddle together in a chaotic mess. Looking at them, it was like a construction foreman leading a bunch of workers to a job site. Looking through the window at this scene, Rinamano suddenly felt that the apocalypse wasn't actually all that terrifying. And zombies weren't quite as scary either. Were the zombies in this world really this unique, or was she just an exception? Rinamano gazed at me driving and muttered to herself, completely lost in thought. Just how terrifying the zombies of the apocalypse were had been made known to the entire world on day one. Otherwise, why would human survivors all hide away and struggle to survive? Leaving aside infectivity, even the most ordinary zombies were more than average people could handle. The moment they spotted prey, they were like wild horses breaking free of their reins, not to mention the terrifying secondary mutated zombies among them. Previously, Rinamano had witnessed such a zombie wipe out a group of armed personnel wielding firearms. It had scared her out of her wits, and she had hidden at home, never daring to come out. It wasn't until she ran out of supplies and was driven to the brink of starvation that she finally bolted outside. At the moment, however, I wasn't thinking about all that. Dragging the steel frames back was preparation to reinforce the shop front, making it much harder for outsiders to barge in. These steel frames were stainless steel beams I had dismantled from the entrance of a bank. Once installed and properly secured, trying to force them open would become extremely difficult. Only an entity with my terrifying strength could dismantle and haul them back. After driving the trailing zombies off to play elsewhere, I began the reinforcement work. I was planning to transform this store, stocked with massive amounts of food, directly into a sanctuary. I was a family-oriented zombie now, after all. I had to fix up my home properly. Rinamano sat behind the checkout counter, resting her chin in her hands as she watched me busy myself for the sake of this home. The look of bliss on her face grew even richer, and she would occasionally let out a silly giggle. Seeing this, I couldn't help scratching my head. This girl who was helping me bear children really was quite simple and cute. Yet I didn't find those silly traits repulsive. Maybe she wouldn't be able to provide the kind of shrewd, capable assistance that helps a man advance like other women could. But there were benefits too. She was obedient and well-behaved. With the system backing me up, I didn't need anyone to assist my career. What I wanted was obedience and compliance. Someone like Rinamano suited my taste perfectly. Once she helped me bear a few more kids later on, life would be even more perfect. Thinking about it, I let out a smile as well. This was what you called life. So what if I transmigrated into a zombie? As long as you broaden your perspective, life can still turn out great. The apocalypse was only a problem for other people. But before enjoying that, I needed to sort out my own food. I had also picked up a fishing net along the way. Once I reinforced the door, I was going to let the fish in the man-made pond learn why flowers are so red and why fishing nets are so tight. By the time the shop door was fully reinforced, it was already dusk. However, wearing my optic-enhanced night vision glasses, this didn't affect me at all, so I headed straight for the man-made pond. When I carried the net to the lakeside, several zombies were immediately attracted, gathering around to circle me, their fellow kind. I had originally planned to go down into the water myself to scare the fish, but seeing these few zombies, I changed my mind. Given my current physique, getting wet wouldn't make me feel cold, but being completely soaked was still quite uncomfortable. So I tied the end of the net's rope around the waist of one of the zombies, walked up behind the bound zombie, found a suitable spot, and delivered a swift kick straight to its back. The zombie was kicked straight into the lake, and then, following a flurry of my urging, it walked in a daze toward the opposite shore. A higher-level bloodline had the ability to command zombies to perform certain tasks. Those zombie kings capable of gathering hordes of zombies relied on this exact trait to drive their packs toward target prey. Although my bloodline hadn't reached the level of a zombie king yet, commanding them to carry out basic behaviors was still quite simple. Soon, that zombie waded through the water to the other side of the lake. The entire process went very smoothly, and before long, the first net was cast. Next was the same routine. One zombie after another was kicked into the lake by me until all the fishing nets were fully cast out. I stood by the shore, looking at the nets in the lake and wearing a smile. If you refuse a toast, you'll be forced to drink a forfeit. You're in for a treat today! But it wasn't over yet. Once the unpaid laborers finished setting the nets, I focused my mind and activated my X-ray vision. Then, the lake water slowly faded and gradually became transparent in my field of vision, leaving the schools of fish swimming inside completely exposed with nowhere to hide. I couldn't help breaking into a wicked grin, and the free laborers who had just climbed back up were thrown right back into the water. However, this time it wasn't to set nets, but to herd the fish hiding at the bottom of the lake. With several zombies thrashing about in the water, the entire man-made pond turned muddy. The frightened fish darted around frantically in all directions and crashed straight into the nets. Of course, I didn't plan on completely wiping out the fish population. This was my food source, so catching enough to eat was plenty. Therefore, once the nets were filled to a reasonable degree, I stopped the herding and hauled the fishing nets back up. Seeing the fresh catches of fish being hauled ashore, the unpaid laborers instantly grew excited. This kind of fresh flesh held an unparalleled attraction for them. Yet, with me, the uninfected duck, present, they wanted to make a move but didn't dare, running around in anxious circles in place. Seeing this, I was thoroughly amused. These zombies actually looked quite cute, though, of course, that was only from my perspective. If humans were to encounter them, these zombies would definitely show humans the meaning of cruelty and terror. Following that, I let out a roar, and the chaotic zombies immediately quieted down. Then they lined up one by one. Although crooked, it formed a basic formation. Seeing this, I smiled in satisfaction. No wonder every boss loves driving their workforce like oxen and horses. This feeling was indeed quite nice. Once the line was formed, I began distributing the fish. Since the zombies had put in the effort, I naturally wouldn't be stingy. After all, I wasn't some heartless boss. Soon, every zombie was handed a few sizable fish, and they immediately grew ecstatic, howling as they gnawed on them. Forget the fish bones. They even swallowed the fish poop down. If a single fish scale dropped on the ground, they'd pick it up and eat it, maintaining the golden rule of wasting absolutely nothing. I simply couldn't bear to watch. It was utterly disgraceful to the zombie race. With a kick to a zombie that was licking fish scales off the ground, I gathered the remaining catch into a bucket. Aside from my own sashimi, I also planned to make fish soup to help Rin Amano nourish herself so she'd have plenty of milk for the future. Just as I was busy gathering the fish, the young girl on the upper floor by the lakeside once again blundered over to her brother. "Big brother, come quick and look! The zombie is catching fish with a net, and they're even lining up to share them!" She shook her brother, who was lying on the bed resting. "Xiaoyue, be a good girl. I still have to go out and look for food early tomorrow morning. If you're not tired, play on the phone. When Big Brother finishes tomorrow, I'll play with you then," the girl's brother said with a face full of helplessness and exhaustion. A zombie setting nets to catch fish and lining up to share them? Why don't you say they're building a rocket to launch into space and build a space station? "Hey, I'm telling the truth. I'm not messing with you." The younger sister was so anxious she stamped her feet. "That weird zombie is still collecting the fish from the net. He's going to leave just like he did during the day." If she could just get her brother to get up and come take a look, he would definitely see it, and then she could prove she wasn't talking nonsense. After some pestering, the girl had no choice but to leave and return to the window. "Right, I can record it. Then Big Brother won't be able to doubt me." A sudden flash of inspiration struck her mind, and she quickly pulled out her phone and turned on the video recording function. But the sky had grown completely dark, so the girl clicked on the night vision recording mode, though night vision mode would cause the phone's auxiliary light to turn on. The girl didn't pay much attention to it, figuring that zombies had terrible eyesight, and since they were on the 10th floor, there was no way they'd be noticed. To her absolute shock, however, the moment her phone's light switched on, I abruptly looked up, my crimson tyrannical eyes locking onto her instantly. Faced with this situation, the girl was so frightened she almost screamed out loud. She hurriedly raised her hand and clamped it over her mouth. In just a fraction of a second, she knew she had messed up. A special zombie capable of commanding other zombies to work for it. How could it possibly be an ordinary zombie? Having attracted the attention of such a zombie, could she possibly end up with a good outcome? Under her older brother's protection, she was indeed a bit naive, and still retained the innocence of a young girl. But that didn't mean she was stupid. Right now, she was filled with overwhelming regret for her actions. If this terrifying zombie came after them, would she and her brother make it out alive? Thinking of this, she was so terrified she burst into quiet sobs. Not only out of fear, but also from the guilt of putting her brother in danger. Yet the scene that followed made her instantly forget to cry. Because the strange zombie she assumed would cause trouble didn't charge upstairs to cause havoc as she expected. Instead, upon seeing her, the peeper, he flashed a gentle smile. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would have died before believing it. She was well aware of how terrifying zombies were. Although she had been heavily sheltered, she knew these horrific monsters possessed zero humanity. Once they caught you, you were guaranteed to be devoured piece by piece. When the apocalypse first descended, a female neighbor she used to play with had turned into a zombie and eaten her own family. If they could eat their own families, it showed just how devoid of humanity they were after turning. Yet here he was, smiling at her, and smiling so gently. Under the moonlight-illuminated night, he smiled just like the nice older boys next door. Could he be a human disguised as a zombie? Facing this bizarre situation, that was the only possibility her mind could conjure. But that didn't make sense either. If it were a human disguise, it would never get past a zombie's dog-like sense of smell. You could wear colored contact lenses to fake the eyes, but body odor could never be disguised, let alone commanding zombies to work. The more she thought about it, the more curious she became. The doubts in her mind only grew stronger, even giving birth to an urge to find out more. For a moment, she completely forgot her fear, hiding behind the window with just the top half of her head showing as she earnestly observed him. At this point, I was also amused by this bold little girl. But since I wasn't a real zombie, I naturally wouldn't give her any trouble. As long as people didn't provoke me, I was quite amiable. Smiling slightly by way of greeting, I continued packing the fish from the net, stuffing them all into a large bucket. The bucket was filled to the brim with a huge haul, weighing around 40 or 50 pounds. Between just Rinamano and me, as long as we kept them alive in water, it would last us a very long time. Once everything was settled, I hung the fishing net up on a nearby tree to dry and then hauled the large bucket back. The girl upstairs kept her gaze fixed on me until I completely disappeared into the night, only then pulling her gaze back. Reflexively, she went to tell her brother, but the phone she had wanted to use for recording had slipped out of her hand onto the floor when she was too terrified earlier. The footage she wanted to capture hadn't been recorded either. That strange zombie catching fish with a net must be using them for food. Next time he comes, I'm definitely going to record it. She resolved in her heart. Treading through the night back to the commercial street, I returned fully loaded, and my mood was quite good. The next moment, however, my footsteps came to an abrupt halt. Because in the darkness ahead, a creeping crimson shadow was crawling toward me step by step. Its heavy breathing, sounding like a large broken bellows, was particularly distinct in the night and extremely eerie. The wandering zombies along the route blocked its path, but as it approached, the wandering zombies all scrambled out of the way. A licker. Wearing my invisible mode optic glasses with night vision capabilities, I recognized at a glance what it was. A licker. That special, terrifying zombie from zombie movies that crawls on all fours, hence the name licker. Even though it lacked skin entirely, with its crimson muscles exposed to the air, ordinary firearms could barely harm it. Even if struck by bullets, it could quickly recover, relying on its extraordinary defense capabilities. For an ordinary person facing this thing, forget resisting. Even running away was impossible. Even with firearms, it was extremely difficult to deal with. Only heavy weapons with massive destructive power could perform somewhat better. With their extreme speed, they were hard to hit, and once they closed in, they were killing machines. I had a deep impression of such powerful zombies, and I didn't expect to run into one today. This licker was sizing me up with its eyes, evidently feeling some wariness toward me, its fellow kind. Its bloodline tier was considered high among the zombie community, but mine was no less inferior to it. In fact, it carried even more oppression. As a mutated zombie, it possessed considerable intelligence and understood how to weigh pros and cons. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't want to spark a conflict with such a powerful peer. However, catching the scent of food made it somewhat agitated. The thick aroma of fresh fish kept stimulating its desire to feed, and saliva dripped like hot chili oil from its huge maw. Following that, it let out a low growl, wanting me, its fellow kind, to share some of the food with it. I understood the meaning, but since it hadn't contributed any effort, wanting something for nothing was out of the question. Immediately, I let out a low growl of my own, signaling it to get lost at once. But the licker, provoked by its craving, how could it be willing to just scram like that? Unwilling to share meant it could only take it by force. Although the pressure coming from this peer was significant, as a powerful mutated zombie, it was definitely no pushover either. With a sharp grip of its thick, powerful forelimbs against the ground, it launched itself toward me like a cannonball out of a cannon. While on the ground, it didn't look particularly large. The moment it leaped into the air, it was a gigantic behemoth-like. Just like a polar bear standing on its hind legs, the sight was immensely shocking to anyone looking directly at it. However, my expression was very calm, and even somewhat excited. Ever since my bloodline underwent a powerful evolution, I hadn't had a proper, serious fight yet. Now that I had encountered a decent opponent, how could I not be excited? The tyrannical nature of zombies makes them extremely bellicose. I was no exception. It was just that this side of me was usually suppressed by my remaining human nature. I immediately put down the large bucket in my hands and, letting out a roar, charged forward, intending to go toe-to-toe with the opponent in a direct clash. The two of us quickly met. Once a licker enters a combat state, it sinks entirely into its tyrannical nature, fighting the opponent to the bitter death. As soon as it charged up, it raised its thick, powerful forelimbs and lashed out viciously at me, hoping to use its terrifying strength to smash my head, its fellow kind, to pieces. In response, I gave a cold smile with no intention of dodging. I similarly raised one hand and slapped right back at the opponent. The two heavy impacts collided. Judging by the proportions of our arms, we were in completely different leagues. My palm striking upward was no different from a mantis trying to stop a chariot. Yet the actual outcome was that the licker's forelimb, which was several times thicker than mine, was fiercely batted back. The force, unable to find an outlet, left its palm a bloody mess, numbing its entire arm and temporarily stripping it of any mobility. Although a zombie's sense of pain is very faint, such massive damage still caused it to emit involuntary screeches. More than anything, it was sheer disbelief. It couldn't comprehend how, in just a single exchange, one of its forelimbs had been batted away. Its small brain capacity simply couldn't provide any answers, leaving it stunned and dazed for a moment. After batting the licker's forelimb back, I forcefully stomped the ground and delivered a high-flying knee strike. The licker was still in a state of shock when this knee strike smashed directly into its chin, sending its massive body flying backward like a somersault before crashing heavily into a roadside car. The impact completely flattened the car and triggered a blaring alarm that echoed far across the silent night, drawing the attention of numerous zombies. Yet when these attracted zombies saw that it was a fight between two powerful peers, they quickly halted their steps. Who says zombies aren't afraid of death? When faced with powerful peers whose bloodlines suppressed them, they didn't dare to show the slightest bit of transgression. This suppression originating from the bloodline is an instinct carved deep into their very genes, and ordinary zombies simply didn't dare to approach. However, the subsequent scene took an unexpected turn. After taking two heavy blows and realizing the vast gap between us, the licker no longer charged forward recklessly as it had at first. Instead, it pressed its body flat against the ground and crawled forward, whimpering softly to indicate its submission. It had been beaten into submission after a mere 2 exchanges. This powerful mutated zombie was not acting cowardly. Rather, the gap in our strengths was too enormous, leaving no room to fight. Continuing the battle would simply be throwing its life away for nothing, making it completely pointless. Yielding to an uninfected zombie wasn't a shameful thing at all. I had originally wanted to test out my physical combat skills, but looking at the licker prostrate and submissive on the ground, my interest instantly vanished. I stepped forward, kicked it flying to drive it out of this commercial street area, and then picked up my fish bucket to continue walking back. This sudden skirmish was an undisputed, crushing victory. The bloodline enhancement granted by the system made my strength even greater than I had imagined. Even terrifying mutated zombies were like fragile paper in front of me, which made me look forward all the more to how strong I would become if my bloodline were enhanced further. Children. I had to have children. The plot of land in my own home had to be farmed with even greater effort. When I returned to the shop, Rinamano hadn't slept yet and was sitting inside waiting for my return. Moreover, she hadn't wasted her time while waiting. She had tidied up the entire shop interior. The place where the two of us slept had been laid out with a soft mattress, followed by a smooth duvet cover and a pair of couples pillows. Not only did it look nice, but it was also very comfortable to lie on. Clearly, she had completely made up her mind to live a proper life with me. A zombie boyfriend. None of the bizarre novels she used to read dared to write something like this, yet she was actually living it now. Thinking about this in her heart, she couldn't help breaking into a smile. Seeing me return, Rinamano's smile grew even warmer as she hopped and skipped over to greet me. "You're back," she asked me affectionately, just like a devoted wife waiting at home. I gave a slight nod in response. Rinamano was already accustomed to this kind of communication. After offering her sweet greeting, she glanced toward the bucket I was holding. Wow, so many fish! There were even pickled cabbage and fish ingredients, all dishes belonging to her favorite cuisine. Or rather, there was no cuisine she didn't like. As a standard foodie, she never turned down anything delicious. When I went out saying I was getting her food, she had thought it was just snacks unavailable in the store, never expecting fresh ingredients. This showed true thoughtfulness. Deeply moved in her heart, she made up her mind right then and there that no matter what, she was going to bear me a child. The fish were prepped by me shortly after. The shop had a washing area where the owner usually cleaned things, and knives and cutting boards were kept in stock. The only trouble was that the tap water had been cut off, but the store had plenty of bottled mineral water, which could completely substitute for running water. Several large fish were filleted into thin slices and placed into 2 large basins, one basin for making pickled fish and the other for me to eat raw. A small portable stove belonging to the shop was lit, and an iron wok was placed on top. First, I poured in the fish bones to boil the broth. Once the water boiled, I added the pickled fish seasoning packet and finally the thinly sliced fish fillets. A rich, savory aroma quickly filled the entire shop. Holding her chopsticks, Rinamano drank her favorite beverage while alternating bites of spicy pickled fish and sips of drink, eating until her entire forehead was covered in sweat. Although I didn't eat cooked food, the taste of the sashimi was also quite good, making it a very enjoyable meal. After eating and drinking to her heart's content, Rinamano, this young girl, initiated advances for the very first time. Her cheeks flushed slightly as she expressed her desire to bear children with me. Naturally, I wasn't going to turn her down. Looking at the proactive Rinamano, I scooped her up in my arms and lifted her down. Deep into the night, the intense battle finally subsided. Just as Rinamano and I were fast asleep in each other's arms, the domestic smartphone left to the side suddenly emitted a notification chime. Then the signal icon in the top right corner suddenly flickered to life, and bars of signal began lighting up one by one. This indicated that someone had started maintaining the signal transmission tower. However, this signal was very unstable, cutting in and out intermittently like an unstable power supply. After bouncing up and down a few times, the signal ultimately vanished. The next morning, Rinamano woke up early to prepare food. The fish brought back yesterday hadn't been eaten up yet and were still kept alive in a large bucket filled with water, so today's menu remained fish. Rinamano was still a university student. Because she wasn't used to getting along with her photography peers, she rented a place alone outside. She cooked her own meals during vacations, so she wasn't clumsy in the kitchen at all. When I woke up from my slumber, I heard the sounds of cooking coming from the washroom, which had been temporarily converted into a kitchen, and couldn't help smiling knowingly. Life right now could be considered back on track. The only thing missing was a proper child. Thinking about the matter of children, I decided I needed to put in some overtime work right after waking up in the morning. Thus, Rin Amano, who was busy cooking, was suddenly grabbed from behind, her skirt was lifted up, and I directly started working overtime. Rin Amano's face instantly flushed bright red, especially since she was still in the middle of cooking. I remained unfazed by this. You cook your meal, I do my work, and we don't interfere with each other. A single breakfast meal was dragged out all the way until noon. Rin Amano's face was completely red. She was thoroughly satisfied, filled to capacity in every aspect. The days that followed passed peacefully and steadily. With enough food brought back, I didn't even step outside, devoting myself entirely to our baby-making grand enterprise. From initial shyness, Rin Amano gradually came to thoroughly enjoy the process. They say there are only exhausted oxen, never plowed to ruin fields, and that saying proved entirely true. While my life here was filled with comfort, the brother and sister by the man-made pond weren't enjoying the same peace. Because the late-night signal change had been spotted by the younger sister who was staying up late playing on her phone, she immediately shared the news with her brother. After all, once mobile signals were restored, humans could communicate again instead of fighting isolated, struggling battles for survival like they were now. Furthermore, the people attempting to restore the signal were extremely likely to be officials. After all, only official authorities would expend the effort and have the energy to do such a thing. Ordinary survivors struggled just to stay alive and had no mental capacity to care about these matters. Therefore, once this event occurred, their hearts grew increasingly restless. Ultimately, after several days of ideological struggle, the brother decided to head to the transmission tower to scout out concrete information. The place they lived in wasn't far from the signal tower. As long as they were careful, there shouldn't be any major issues. If they truly managed to find the official authorities, their lives would definitely become much better. "Big brother, do you really have to go?" "I'm scared staying at home alone," the girl said, looking at her older brother, not wanting him to take risks. Her brother didn't want to either, but as time went on, the zombies were growing increasingly restless, and their strength continued to grow. Finding food was getting harder and harder for him, and every time he went out to forage, he worried he wouldn't make it back. If he didn't, what would happen to his frail younger sister? Therefore, he had to find the official authorities. Once they found an official organization, even if he unfortunately perished, official personnel would still look after her. So despite his reluctance, he suppressed his feelings. "Sayuri, don't worry, Big Brother is just going to take a look and we'll be right back." Seeing her brother's persistence, the girl had no choice but to nod in agreement. "Wait for Big Brother at home. Remember not to open the door for anyone else, no matter who knocks." With those words, she grabbed a blood-stained fire axe, opened the front door, and carefully stepped outside. Watching her brother leave, the girl's face was filled with worry, and she lost all heart to play with her favorite phone. Eventually, she went to the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the zombie that would smile at her. But ever since last time, she hadn't seen him for several days, as if what she saw before had merely been a dream. It wasn't until afternoon, just as she was about to pull her gaze away, that she once again caught sight of that familiar figure. Several days of unceasing, round-the-clock farming had tested even my formidable physique to its limits. Fortunately, the fish caught last time had run out, so I came back outside. The fishing net was still hanging on the tree, and several zombies that had tasted sweetness earlier were still lingering nearby. Catching my scent, they actually behaved quite eagerly. For zombies to actively work, no one would believe such a thing if told, yet it was happening right now. I didn't even need to deliberately urge them after tying the fishing net around their waists. They very consciously waded into the water and cast the nets. I didn't have to do a thing. I just sat by the bank watching my oxen and horses work. Feeling a gaze fixed on me, I looked along the direction and saw the young girl from last time revealing half her head to watch me. Noticing my gaze, she shrank her head back for a moment, but didn't look away, locking eyes with me across the distance. The more she looked, the more she convinced herself that this zombie, was actually a human in disguise. As to why I wouldn't be attacked by zombies and could command them to work, she figured it was some kind of special superpower. Constantly browsing her phone, she had read plenty of apocalyptic novels, superpowers, mental telepathy. She had seen them all. It was precisely because of this that, upon realizing I held no malice toward her, she wasn't overly terrified. "Are you a human?" After locking eyes for a bit, the girl retrieved a drawing board and pen from inside her house, wrote a few large characters on it, and initiated long-distance communication. Seeing this, I was somewhat amused. Not only was the other party unafraid of me, but she actually wanted to communicate. Her nerves were truly steel-plated. Or perhaps this special zombie of mine really didn't look scary at all. I rubbed my chin, deciding to give her a little scare. Before I could start, however, something jumped out to ruin the mood. After the net caught fish, several large fish surged to the surface, struggling in an attempt to escape, which was normally a delightful thing. Yet a sneaky creature dashed out from the lakeside bushes, leaped straight into the water, and snatched the fish caught in the net right into its own hands. After snatching several large fish in a row, this fellow scrambled out of the water and took off running on full blast. The entire sequence was smooth and fluid, faster than an ordinary person could react. Yet I was no ordinary person. The moment this fellow dashed out, I spotted it immediately. By the time it grabbed the fish and climbed ashore, I was already waiting for it on the bank. "You dare come steal my fish? Looks like the lesson from last time wasn't enough." I angrily blocked its path to intercept it. The fish-stealing culprit was none other than that same licker from before. Not only had it failed to steal last time and taken a severe beating, but it still hadn't given up. Seeing me come out to fish, it had secretly hidden by the lakeside, waiting until the fish were netted before swooping in to plunder them. For a zombie to meticulously scheme to steal food sounded utterly absurd, yet it was happening right in front of my eyes. Absurd or not, daring to steal my things was simply courting death. Last time, seeing that we belonged to the same kind, I had let the opponent off, but this time I wouldn't show any mercy. After cutting off its escape route, I prepared to deal with it. The opponent, however, seemed prepared. It pried open a nearby sewage manhole cover and dove right inside, vanishing in the blink of an eye like a red mudworm. Inside was the city's underground sewage drainage network, a sprawling maze with an overwhelmingly foul odor. I simply walked over, took one look down, and lost all desire to give chase. Over a few fish? Making me chase someone through shit and urine was something I genuinely couldn't bring myself to do. The cunning of this liquor refreshed my understanding of mutated zombies. It seemed the zombies in this world were far from simple. Even though I had only encountered them one by one, I could sense the special nature of these mutated variants. If a single liquor was like this, what about other zombies? Humans would find themselves completely pinned down with zero room for a comeback. Such special mutated zombies were definitely not few in number. Otherwise, ordinary zombies that merely wandered blindly could never have suppressed humans wielding powerful weapons to this degree. At least, human civilization wouldn't have collapsed and had its long-standing rule overthrown in such a short span of time. Thinking of this, my expression grew somewhat grave. At the same time, a sense of urgency welled up. Originally, I felt my strength was sufficient, brushing aside opponents with pure brute force. But now, this fish-stealing thief had taught me a lesson. With such high intelligence paired with formidable strength, even though I was technically a zombie and shouldn't have conflicts with my own kind, who could say for sure when we actually met? If some special zombie targeted Rinamano, I could never remain indifferent, making battle inevitable. Furthermore, would humans who controlled ultimate weapons truly be willing to stay dormant like this? Various powerful conventional weapons and even nuclear arms hadn't even been deployed yet. No way. I had to accelerate my pace of growing stronger, or else I wouldn't be able to secure stable survival. Having finally grown accustomed to life here, I didn't want to die a second time. I immediately decided to speed up my growth. Currently, the fastest way for me to grow stronger was none other than purifying my own bloodline. Just like last time, a single vial of bloodline purification fluid had caused my strength to skyrocket dramatically. However, the current situation was that Rinamano couldn't bear children in the short term, meaning the rewards for doing so were temporarily unavailable. The only remaining option was the reward for taking another wife. Thinking of taking another wife, I raised my head and looked up toward the girl on the upper floor. Just as transactions could be made with one girl, they could be made with another. Right now, I had food, drink, and massive leverage in my hands. But seeing the girl's youthful appearance, she might not even be of legal age yet, I dismissed the thought. A person could be a beast, but you couldn't be worse than a beast. With this annoyance in my heart, I lost the mood to scare the other party. Was I not unhappy about having my fish stolen? Seeing that I showed no intention of communicating, the girl wiped the characters off her drawing board and wrote out a new set of large words. I still ignored her, prompting her to start writing again. Not only was she chattering endlessly about random topics, but she even asked for my name, acting completely like an idle chatterbox. "You're so bold. Aren't you afraid I'll go up there and eat you?" Finally, losing my patience, I used my foot to forcefully draw a few large characters into the grass by the man-made pond. "Not afraid. I think you're not a zombie at all, and you definitely won't eat me," the girl responded with complete certainty, though who knew where she got that confidence. "Fine, you wait right there." I wrote a few more characters, gathered up the ox and horse zombies that had been busy herding fish into the nets, and began walking directly toward her building. Seeing this scene, the girl instantly lost her composure. She wasn't afraid of me, but she was definitely terrified of those ox and horse zombies. "Don't! I'm scared of you!" The girl instantly surrendered, pulling even her little head back inside the window. "Ha! As if I couldn't handle you!" I gave a cold smile. "A little yellow-haired brat. It was only because I had a kind heart. Otherwise, she wouldn't have gotten off so easily." At that moment, the girl was genuinely frightened. After pulling her head back, she patted her chest. Once she gathered her wits, she also felt that she had been much too bold. If I could drive zombies to work for me, even if I really were a disguised human, it wasn't someone she could afford to provoke. If she genuinely displeased me and I came looking for trouble, she wouldn't have any way to resist. However, not long after, she cautiously poked her little head back out. Fear was one thing, but curiosity was quite another. Only, I had already packed up the net and left. She could only stare blankly at the man-made pond that had returned to silence, slipping into a daze. Just moments ago, she had truly been terrified, but the long-distance communication between the two of us had temporarily suppressed her worry over her older brother's departure. Now that she was alone once more, an endless wave of anxiety washed over her again. When night fell and her brother still hadn't returned, this condition worsened, leaving her with no choice but to press against the window and gaze fixedly at the man-made pond in the darkness. I, however, was completely unaware of this. At that moment, I had plunged into a state of utter bewilderment because Rinamano, who had just eaten the fish soup, abruptly threw up. The sight of vomiting right after eating looked every bit like morning sickness. But we had only been together for a few days. Had I really been saddled with someone else's child just like that? My entire body went numb. Could the legendary tragedy of becoming an unwitting stepfather actually have happened to me? Yet that didn't add up either. During our very first time together, Rinamano had unequivocally bled. Furthermore, judging by her clumsy performance back then, it didn't look fake at all. So how was the current situation to be explained? Without a second thought, I stepped out through the night and dashed to a pharmacy to grab a pregnancy test. Right now, all speculations were useless. Only a real test would reveal the truth. Am I pregnant? Dizzy from vomiting, Rinamano stared blankly at the pregnancy test I had brought back, unable to process it for a moment. Her morning sickness reaction certainly looked like it, but we had only been together for a couple of days. She definitely shouldn't be pregnant yet. As for being someone else's second-hand goods, she could swear to the heavens that before me she hadn't even held hands with a guy, let alone anything else. Still, after pondering for a moment, Rinamano took the pregnancy test and went to check. When she emerged from the bathroom, her complexion had already turned deathly pale. She really was pregnant, yet this simply shouldn't be possible. While she could be a bit airheaded, she wasn't so completely clueless that she knew nothing after growing up to this age. In just a few days, the egg might not even have fully fertilized. To reach her current stage of pregnancy should take at least a month or two. At that moment, she was on the verge of tears, wanting to explain herself, but having no idea where to even begin. However, I didn't say anything and directly reached out, pulling her into my embrace. System, what is going on here? I queried the system mentally. As a multi-child, multi-wife system, it should be able to detect whether the child belonged to the host. If it couldn't even detect that much, then becoming an unwitting stepfather wouldn't even be an injustice. Please rest assured, host, the offspring carried by your wife, Rin Amano, is undoubtedly yours. Then how can it happen so fast? I questioned with lingering doubt. In response, the system replied with just 4 words: genetic mutation. That meant my genes were different from ordinary people's, so the gestation of offspring would be considerably faster. What took other people 1 or 2 months to manifest could happen in just a few days, under the influence of my genes. Just like different animals having completely different gestation cycles, that was a very common phenomenon in nature. Calculated by this speed, Rin Amano would be able to give birth to my child in just a month or 2. After doing a quick mental conversion of the timeline, I was left completely dazed. If that was truly the case, I wouldn't need a whole year. At most, 2 months and I'd be a father. Normally, that is indeed the case. However, the pregnant wife's nutrition must keep up. Otherwise, the development of the offspring will be affected. Please ensure you make extra efforts to guarantee the safe birth of your offspring. The system prompt chimed once more, giving a response to my doubts. Once I figured out the whole story, I pulled out my portable notebook and started writing to comfort Rin Amano. Don't cry. The child you're carrying is ours. I absolutely believe you. But Rin Amano, being the mother, knew even better who the child belonged to, yet this argument held no persuasive power. Anyone with common sense knew. Even though I trusted her implicitly, she had started doubting herself, which made her cry even harder until snot bubbles were forming. There are no buts. The reason this happened is because my genes are different. I am no longer human. I wrote down words of comfort once again, fearing that she wouldn't understand what genes meant since it was too profound, so I flat out told her I wasn't human. Previously, Rin Amano indeed didn't really grasp what genes were. It was far too abstract. But the latter part was simple. Because I was a zombie, I was different from ordinary people, and the gestation of offspring was no exception. If anyone else had said that, Rin Amano certainly wouldn't have believed it. Being a bit airheaded didn't mean she was truly stupid. She just had a carefree disposition. But coming from me, she believed it almost immediately, because I truly wasn't human. Regarding my zombie identity, no one knew it better than she did. Is that really true? Rin Amano asked again for confirmation, though in her heart she already believed it. After all, she knew her own conduct. She had truly never betrayed me. Really? I wrote firmly. Seeing this confirmatory reply, the tightly wound knot in Rin Amano's chest finally relaxed, and soon her face broke out in full smiles. If she had gotten pregnant beforehand, she would have panicked to her wits' end. But after reaching the initial clarity stage, her heart was filled solely with joy and happiness. Wonder if it's a boy or a girl. Once she figured out the situation, Rin Amano's thoughts shifted very quickly. Boys and girls are all the same, I smiled as I wrote out a reply. Rubbing her still flat belly as if a thought had crossed her mind, Rin Amano looked up at me with hesitation. Do you have a name? Ren. I directly wrote down my name. Rin Amano muttered the name softly to herself, then asked again, Can you tell me, are you human or a zombie? This was a question she had wanted to ask all along. Although I looked like a zombie and possessed various zombie traits, my behavior didn't match at all. She had long wanted to ask this, but out of fear, she never dared to voice it. Now, with a child between us and having developed genuine feelings for me, she felt she needed to clear things up. At least let the child know what kind of father they had. A mother turns strong when she has a child, and she had nothing left to fear. I paused in thought for a moment before picking up the pen and writing. I am both human and a zombie. Yet Rin Amano was left completely confused. Each word made sense on its own, but put together, her little brain simply couldn't comprehend it. I didn't elaborate further. Some things were simply impossible to explain. Even if I told her I was a transmigrator who had transmigrated into a zombie, it was all an unanswerable mess of accounts. Looking somewhat dazed, Rin Amano ultimately chose to eat first. Now that she had a child, her body demanded higher consumption and required replenishment. As for the morning sickness, if she threw up, she would just eat again. Her appetite remained exceptionally strong. In this regard, her traits as a little foodie truly performed a monumental service. Eat a bit more. I scooped up another bowl of soup for her while starting to ponder where I could track down some fresh ingredients. Relying solely on fish meant nutritional supplementation would still fall short. Forget exotic delicacies. Chicken meat and eggs were bare necessities. If even those were missing, maintaining proper nutrition would be extremely difficult. Pregnancy already demanded massive consumption, to say nothing of my different genes causing an accelerated gestation period. If nutrition couldn't keep up, not only would rapid gestation be affected, but even her health would run into trouble. Rin Amano didn't think that deeply into it. She just slurped down the fish soup. Fearing she might throw up again, she stroked her belly after finishing, looking utterly adorable. It wasn't that she didn't have a care in the world. Rather, they say pregnancy makes a woman foolish for 3 years, and since she was already a bit of a ditz to begin with, she was doubly so now. I didn't bother reminding her of anything. Sourcing nutritional supplies was the father's job. Rin Amano's sole responsibility as a mother was to take good care of the child. Only, with zombies everywhere now, trying to find uninfected livestock was going to be quite a challenge. The only place they might still exist was in captivity by other survivors. While the apocalyptic shockwave was undoubtedly devastating, there were always lucky survivors who managed to hoard plenty of supplies for themselves. As long as I could track down such survivors, I could trade with them. If push came to shove, I could just resort to intimidation. After all, I was a bona fide monster. But since survivors were all hiding away, finding them was by no means easy, let alone finding someone who happened to be raising livestock. I didn't even know where to begin looking, which gave me a mild headache as I scratched my head. Still, since she was only in the early stages of pregnancy, fish meat could still tide us over. If worst came to worst, heading to a vegetable market to grab some dried goods and supplements would work just as well. What's wrong? Seeing that I seemed troubled, Rin Amano asked with concern. Nothing. Just thinking about getting some good food so you can eat your fill and never go hungry. It's fine. I can get full-on snacks too. You don't need to stress over it, Rin Amano said with a giggle, not wanting me to worry too much. Hearing that, I ruffled her hair, though my decision remained unchanged. Snacks could keep hunger at bay for a bit, but nutrition was out of the question. Rest at home while I head out for a bit. Keep the walkie-talkie turned on at all times and contact me immediately if anything happens. I picked up my notebook and instructed her. The walkie-talkie was something I had rigged up over the past few days, powered by a battery, guaranteeing communication within a 3,000-meter radius. Okay. Rin Amano nodded obediently, picked up the walkie-talkie, and switched it on. I also picked up a walkie-talkie, clipped it to my waist, and after giving Rin Amano a gentle hug, opened the door and stepped outside. Rin Amano watched me leave with a tender gaze before closing the door behind me and locking it layer by layer. Once that was done, she pulled up a stool, sat behind the radio console, rested her chin in her hands, and waited. After heading out, I hopped onto my three-wheeler and drove toward the nearby vegetable market. The putt-putt sound of the three-wheeler was crisp, drawing groups of zombies along the way. However, while they rushed forward, they didn't attack, simply trailing silently behind the vehicle. This was naturally something I did on purpose, not to show off, but because if I encountered survivors armed with ranged weaponry, a large trailing mob of zombies made for excellent cannon fodder. A lean camel is still bigger than a horse. Humanity, as the former rulers, possessed an extremely advanced technological civilization that shouldn't be underestimated. Because the apocalypse had broken out in the afternoon, a massive number of zombies were roaming the vegetable market, densely packed as far as the eye could see. However, this didn't affect me. In fact, it was a good thing. With so many zombies around, it proved that the supplies inside the market were largely untouched. All kinds of material supplies were bound to be fully stocked. Live chickens were definitely gone. If they hadn't starved, they would have been eaten by zombies. But eggs should still be available, along with various dried mushrooms, abalone, and the like. After parking the three-wheeler securely at the entrance of the market, I strode inside. Yet, I failed to notice that behind a vegetable delivery truck, a pair of cold, chilling eyes was locked onto me, not looking away until I stepped deep into the market. As the largest vegetable market in the vicinity, its scale wasn't small, offering everything from various condiments to raw ingredients. There had been seafood and live produce vendors too, but they had all been swept clean by zombies. Looking out, it was a scene of utter devastation with dried bloodstains scattered everywhere across the floor. In some corner spots, bleached white bones were visible, showing that a bloody massacre had erupted here when the apocalypse descended. With a silent sigh, I didn't dwell on it. Taking care of oneself was priority. Stepping past the ravaged fresh produce section, I quickly reached the dried goods aisle, pulled out a pushcart, and kicked off an apocalyptic $0 shopping spree. As long as items looked usable, I piled them high. In no time at all, the cart was packed to the brim. Deciding to move this batch to the vehicle first and see what else was missing before grabbing more, the moment my guard dropped, a piercing whistle of wind struck from behind. Without a second's hesitation upon hearing the sound, I dropped low and rolled right underneath the three-wheeler. Almost the exact instant I rolled beneath it, a cold, razor-sharp glint flashed right across where I had been standing. The metal frame of the three-wheeler's cargo bed was sliced cleanly off like tofu, and the dried goods stacked on top were likewise cleaved apart by the chilling blade. Rolling from underneath the vehicle to the opposite side, I looked up at the sight, my pupils instantly shrinking. If that blow had landed on me, I might not have died, but severe injuries were guaranteed. Suppressing the turbulent waves in my heart, I quickly rose to my feet and glared coldly in the direction of the culprit. It was a bizarre zombie. While possessing a humanoid build, it sported 4 arms. The front 2 were bone blade arms resembling long sabers, while the rear 2 were sharp, powerful claws. Its 2 legs bent slightly forward, ending in grip-optimized beast paws. The muscular structure at its toes was packed with explosive power, giving its strange form the terrifying, sadistic look of a humanoid black praying mantis. Failing to finish me off with a single slash, it let out a roar, leaped over the three-wheeler, and slashed straight down at my head. I didn't dare take it head-on. A light tap of my foot against the ground allowed me to instantly widen the distance. With plenty of ordinary zombies clustered around, my retreat carried me right back into the middle of the horde, letting me probe the enemy's depth. Compared to the liquor, this humanoid mantis zombie exerted a pressure on me that was multiplied several times over. Even so, I felt no fear. It was a good chance to understand the mutated zombies of this world. The mantis zombie had no idea what I was thinking. It was a high-tier zombie known as a hunter, specializing in hunting other advanced zombies. As for why it did so, naturally it was because advanced zombies possessed items that aided its evolution. It didn't slaughter aimlessly, instead it elevated itself through carnage. Once targeted by it, it was a fight to the death. The lickers were formidable, but countless of them had already fallen beneath its blade arms. This entire area was packed with ordinary zombies, not that variants were scarce, but nearly all of them had already been hunted down by it. Its twin blade arms danced continuously like a killing machine, brutally butchering the cannon fodder zombies blocking its path along the way. As it plowed forward, it left behind a trail of spraying flesh and blood, though the obstructions did slow its pace considerably. Furthermore, its attention had been partially divided. Seizing this exact moment, I stopped retreating, grabbed a nearby zombie by the collar, and hurled it forward. Immediately afterward, my figure closed in like a phantom. Habitually, the blade arm zombie slashed the flying zombie apart in a single stroke. Yet it was delayed for a mere fraction of a second. Normally that wouldn't matter, but right now it constituted a fatal opening. Capitalizing on that exact window, I completed my counterattack in a split second. I threw a kick, and the arrogant blade arm zombie was sent flying through the air. Landing on the ground, a flash of puzzlement crossed its eyes as it failed to understand why it had been knocked away. But that confusion vanished in a flash, and its pupils quickly turned icy cold again. Raising one blade arm to point at me, its body abruptly shot forward once more. Initially visible to the naked eye, it vanished almost instantly, or rather, it turned invisible. Not only was its silhouette gone, but even the sound of its movement disappeared. Faced with this kind of invisibility, anyone else, no matter how strong, would find it a headache and risk being counterkilled. But I merely paused for a moment before my expression turned bizarre. Aside from enhanced vision and night vision, my focusing glasses also possess the ability to pierce through illusions. If it hadn't turned invisible, fine. But by turning invisible, it was literally delivering itself to my doorstep. I didn't make a move immediately, simply standing still to wait for the fish to bite. The blade-armed zombie, currently in stealth mode, had no idea its ability was completely transparent before me. Seeing its target standing there like an idiot, the corners of its mouth split into a cruel grin. It didn't rush to attack, instead strolling up unhurriedly before raising its razor-sharp blade arms and bringing them down in a straight, heavy chop toward me. If that blow landed, given the sharpness of its blade arms, I would definitely have been cleaved in two. However, far from succeeding as it anticipated, the descending blade arms were caught dead in a clamp by my bare hands, rendering it completely unable to budge. With a sudden burst of brute force on my part, the clamped blade arms snapped clean in two. Seizing one of the broken blade arms, I whipped my hand around, and its remaining blade arm was sheared off as well. Terrified, the blade-armed zombie scrambled backward. Staring at its severed arms, it lapsed back into confusion. As a hunter, its intelligence wasn't low. Realizing it couldn't kill this prey, it widened the gap slightly and prepared to make a run for it. But the moment it turned its back to me, signaled the countdown to its life. Gripping the sharp blade arm tightly, I stomped hard on the ground and shot forward like a cannonball, flashing right behind it. Then, with a quick sweep of the blade arm, its head went flying into the air. Stepping forward, I crushed its skull with a single stomp to eliminate any chance of regeneration. Suddenly, a white crystal rolled out from its brain matter. It looked like gelatin, but possessed greater clarity. Is this a virus crystal? I tried asking the system mentally, but received no reply. Only systems related to the multi-child, multi-wife function would pop up corresponding information. Everything else was completely ignored. I was long accustomed to this, so I simply shook my head and dropped the thought. I had been out quite long enough. If I didn't return soon, Rin Amano would start worrying. Tapping gently on the walkie-talkie, I soon heard Rin Amano's voice. It sounded relatively normal, though her tone carried a hint of change, showing she was growing anxious after my prolonged absence. Without further delay, I set off. Though the three-wheeler's cargo bed had been sliced down a bit, it was still drivable. After grabbing a few more crates of surviving eggs, I drove the vehicle back. When the rolling shutter door was lifted, Rin Amano was already waiting inside and had unlocked the inner door upon seeing it was me. "You're back?" Rin Amano called out cheerfully. I gave a slight nod and began carrying the items into the shop. The variety of dried goods and eggs made the foodie Rin Amano beam with joy, her large eyes crinkling into happy crescents as she eagerly pitched in to help organize everything. Once we finished unloading, I sat to the side and pulled out that white crystal, wanting to study it. "What's this?" Having finished tidying up, Rin Amano walked over and asked with curiosity upon seeing the crystal in my hand. "A special crystal," I wrote down in reply while handing it over for her to look at. Although we hadn't figured out what it was yet, we could at least confirm it wasn't anything harmful. When Rin Amano took it in her hands, she initially just played with it casually, but her expression slowly turned bizarre. "What is it?" I asked with a trace of worry, thinking the crystal might have some issue. I kind of want to eat it. Or rather, the baby in my tummy is telling me to eat it." Hearing this explanation, I couldn't react for a moment. The baby wanted to eat it? The baby in Rin Amano's belly? Just how small was this kid anyway? Even if mutated genes made its development speed different, it couldn't be absurd to this degree. I don't know either," Rin Amano said, feeling uneasy herself because she also found it ridiculous. Yet deep inside her belly, there really was a faint pulsation linked to her heart, urging her to consume the crystal. I fell silent, reaching out to place my palm over Rin Amano's belly to sense whatever was going on. Rin Amano remained silent as well, gazing at me with worry. Since she wasn't particularly sharp-witted to begin with, naturally she had no grand ideas when facing such a bizarre situation. "The baby really wants to eat it," I said after withdrawing my hand a moment later and writing down my findings. Rin Amano nodded earnestly. As time passed, the mental impulse inside her body grew increasingly intense, to the point where she could barely hold back. Seeing this, I stopped hesitating. I pinched off a small corner, ate it myself first, and felt a warm sensation spread through my stomach. "Can it be eaten?" Rin Amano asked with eager puppy dog eyes. She had been tormented so badly by the cravings that it felt as though she hadn't eaten in days. The hunger signals continuously released from her belly made her genuinely feel like she was starving, which was truly a form of torture for a foodie. Eat a little bit first, I wrote after some thought. Since the system, that son of a bitch, was keeping silent, I could only test it using this crude method. Okay. Rinamano was very obedient. She pinched off a tiny piece and swallowed it down with some water. How is it? I quickly wrote out a question. I don't feel as hungry anymore, and my body feels warm, Rinamano reported after taking a moment to sense the changes. Wait a bit longer. Make sure there are no other weird feelings before you continue eating. Okay? Rinamano nodded, obediently. An hour later, the entire crystal had been consumed, yet Rinamano still licked her lips with lingering satisfaction, as if she had just eaten something exquisite. Is it good? I asked, with a strange expression. I had eaten a piece earlier, too, and didn't feel any particular taste. There wasn't really much taste, but after eating it, the baby seems very satisfied, as if it got some kind of nourishment. And I'm not hungry anymore either. Hearing that, I was left utterly speechless. What on earth kind of monster was this hammered kid of mine? It had only been fertilized a few days ago, and it was already ordering its mother around for snacks? What was it going to do once it was born? Besides, what kind of creature would a baby born from mutated genes turn out to be? Putting everything else aside, just look at the parents' identities. One was a normal human and the other a mutated zombie. This combination was undeniably unprecedented. As for matters concerning the child, if anything feels off in the future, remember to let me know right away, I wrote. In the end, I still cautioned her. I don't understand the situation myself right now, and the system refuses to explain anything about this. Rinamano naturally wouldn't disobey, nodding repeatedly in agreement. With the dried goods and eggs I had brought back, Rinamano wouldn't have to worry about nutritional issues in the short term. Whenever she wanted something fresh, I would go fish in the man-made pond, so nothing out of the ordinary happened over the next few days. The only constant was that every time I went to fish at the man-made pond, the girl in the building by the lake would use her drawing board to communicate. It was mostly the girl talking, while I only responded occasionally, not because I was aloof, but because she was simply too much of a chatterbox. It was as if she had been cooped up on her own for too long. The moment she found someone to talk to, she just kept going endlessly. Sure enough, today, as soon as I arrived by the lake, she was already waiting early. Good morning! The drawing board was put up against the window and displayed the moment I got there, clearly written beforehand. Are you really that idle? I was left completely exasperated. This was an apocalyptic world where people ate people, yet she showed not an ounce of that awareness, just idly passing the time day after day. I am actually very idle. My big brother told me to stay home and not go out, and staying by myself is driving me stir-crazy. Where's your brother? The two of us conversed back and forth like pen pals, sentence by sentence. However, when asked about her brother, the chatty little girl fell silent for a moment before responding. My brother went out a few days ago and still hasn't come back. The drawing board was raised up, but it lacked the cheerful brightness of our previous exchanges, and her little head drooped slightly. Seeing this, I fell silent as well, and at the same time understood why the girl talked so much. It wasn't that she loved talking so much, but rather that she needed our dialogue to distract herself from the ominous premonition weighing on her heart. In this world where the apocalypse had broken out, someone going out for several days without returning was hardly difficult to guess. I didn't press any further, and the girl stopped talking as well, quietly resting her chin on her arms as she watched me fish. With my perspective-cheating vision, today was naturally another day of bountiful harvest, and the few forced labor zombies even stuffed themselves until their mouths were covered in colorful residue. Picking up the bucket of fish, I had originally intended to head home, but after casting a glance at the girl resting on her windowsill, I walked over to the base of her building instead. Is something the matter? The little girl asked curiously in writing. Find a rope and lower it down. I'm giving you something. What kind of thing? Though puzzled, the girl followed my instructions, and very quickly a network cable was lowered down. Without wasting any time, I took the cable she lowered and threaded several live, wriggling fish onto it. Have some fish. After writing these words on the ground, I picked up my bucket and left. The girl looked at the words on the ground and then at the fish strung onto the cable, standing there in a daze for a moment.